Hi, welcome to our channel of Ignou audiobooks. Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Continuing Education, Bachelor's Degree Program, Elective Course, Rural Development, BRDE 101 Rural Development, Indian Context, Block 3 Nature and Process of Development Unit 2 Pre-Independence Initiatives in Rural Development 2.0 Aims and Objectives. This unit aims at explaining the different approaches, objectives and programs of early rural development experience and enumerating their successes and failures. The objective of this unit is to help you learn the following. The evolution of rural development program in India. The problems that were faced in these experiments. The changes which have been taking place in terms of policies and approaches for rural development since L920s. Comparing the early experiments with the present programs and identifying the similarity and dissimilarities between them, and identifying some of the factors that contributed to the success of these programs. 2.1 Introduction. In the previous unit, you have learnt the concepts, meaning and approaches of rural development. In this unit, you will know about the attempts at improving rural conditions before and after independence. Rural development in India has a long history. Even though there was no major effort made before 1947 for the development of rural India, there were a few experiments attempted by some individuals who committed themselves for the upliftment of the rural poor. These programmers had scientific temper. They were not mainly concerned with major socio-economic changes. They remained confined to areas where they were initiated and lacked the spread-out effect. In spite of their shortcomings, they did lay the foundation for the emergence of rural development programs in India. In our attempt to unravel the experiences in rural development, we will confine our analysis to a study of their objectives, program strategies, the lessons derived from them and the emergence of Community Development Program, CDP. In order to understand these early initiatives, first let us understand the features of colonial administration, the colonial situation in rural areas in the early 20th century and major problems of rural India. 2.2 Features of colonial administration. Colonial period was marked by stable law and order situation and very strong administrative setup. The main features of this administrative setup were elitism, centralization and paternalism. Power was concentrated in the hands of a small governing class. For smooth functioning, a hierarchical order was encouraged. The first-class elites at the top placed second and third-class elites as collaborators at lower levels. Existing or potential local centers of authority or defiance were ruthlessly eliminated or cajoled into subjugation. Was general non-participation and the stunting of local initiative. The consequence of paternalism was dependency. 2.2.1 The colonial situation in rural areas. The rural areas were gradually transformed under colonial rule. Anarchical strife was suppressed and productive cultivation of land was extended. But after a few decades, prospects of common prosperity faded away as the population began to increase. And in absence of any new developmental initiative, the rural economy began to stagnate. Increased population and reduced non-farm employment weakened the traditional status of farmers, workers and artisans. The stagnation of the rural economy led to tension between the landlords and merchants and moneylenders on one side and farmers, workers and artisans on the other side. Consequently, landlords became more oppressive, demanding higher rents and resorting to law courts to enforce their demands or evict their tenants. Another privileged class, the merchant moneylenders, also learned to use colonial law to make larger profits and extort compounded interest from borrowers. The legal and administrative structure of the empire was strong, but, in the rural areas, it was often subject to corruption and too often it became a pliant tool in the hand of landlords and moneylenders. But a few decades later, in the middle period of the empire, in spite of some progress and much peace, the British administrators had to acknowledge the emergence of four major problems. The recurrence of famine, the inequity of land tenure, ever-increasing peasant indebtedness, and smoldering disaffection with the government. 2.2.2 Perception of four major rural problems. During the last decades of the 19th century and early part of the 20th century, famines occurred at frequent intervals, devastating whole regions, generating enormous human misery. Eviction by landlords worsened the plight of tenants and sharecroppers, and sometimes this led to violent outbursts. The ruthless operations of merchant money lenders were leading the peasants, workers and artisans to debt trap and depriving many of them the basic amenities of their livelihood. Famine, cause and cure. Many Royal Inquiry Commission inquired into famines and prescribed measures for relief and prevention. These commissions found out that famine was a natural Asian phenomenon, partly due to the climate and partly to bad farming, which could not be prevented except in a few regions where irrigation canals could be built. In the regions deprived of irrigation facilities and depend on rained agriculture, famine shock could be lessened by means of quick transportation of food supplies by railway and roads. One of the outcome of various inquiry commissions was a famine code, which described, in detail, when and how the relief material should be disturbed to save the disabled from starvation, or how to organize public works for unemployed peasants, or to advance loans to the landowners for the next cultivation. The Bengal famine, 1943, was one of the greatest man-made famines in Indian history. 2.2.3 Abuses of land tenure, tenancy reforms. Commissions appointed to analyze eruptions of agrarian unrest exposed innumerable abuses of power by planters and landlords. The commissions generally upheld the tenure system. They recommended a little more control over landlords and planters and a few more rights for tenants. Landless laborers were outside their purview because, until then, they were an insignificant minority. Within the context of a stagnant economy, depressed prices, diminishing holdings, rising rents and interest charges, the land tenure and tenancy reforms could have helped a lot of the peasant farmers, tenants, and sharecroppers, but somehow these reforms could not materialize. Peasant indebtedness, cause and cure. Landlords were not the only who were abusing the power acquired by them under the empire. Merchants and money lenders were doing the same. That low prices and high interest charges were bankrupting the peasants. Many of them were losing their lands. Attempts were made, nonetheless, to reduce usury and regulate money lenders. Regulations were enacted, but rarely enforced. Toward the end of the 19th century, cooperative societies modeled after the German credit unions came into existence. It was hoped that the strength of unity of the peasants, they would be able to protect themselves from the excesses of merchant money lenders, just as the German farmers had done a generation earlier. During the abnormal agricultural boom of the First World War, village cooperatives flourished briefly, but the following slump soon made them insolvent. Banks of the bankrupts. The early decades of our century found peasant indebtedness growing inexorably, not much affected by regulations of usury or by credit and marketing cooperatives. Rural disaffection and its remedy. As an antidote to the distress of rural indebtedness, colonial administrators imported cooperatives from Germany. As a safeguard against the dangers of rural disaffection, they imported the Anglo-Saxon concept of local government. They hoped that local councils would radiate feelings of participation, banish apathy, and encourage local initiative. Furthermore, beginning logically at the bottom, training in local self-government would gradually upgrade the Indians for national independence. But the promotion by eccentric pioneers of the concept of decentralization and autonomy could not be reconciled with the dominant imperial attitudes, which were centralist, elitist and paternalistic. Decade after decade, until the sudden end of the empire, cooperatives or panchayats, local councils, remained not as functional parts of the steel frame but as its drum. You are listening to this audiobook on Audio Learn Ignou.
2.3 Pre-Independence Initiatives. The roots of India's attempts at experimenting with various approaches to rural development can be traced to the early 1900s. Perhaps the first experiment was started in the year 1920, when Rabindranath Tagore, one of the legends of this century, started the famous Sri Niketan project. Since 1920, there have been a number of efforts made by dedicated men like Spencer Hathaway, Florida, Brain and Mahatma Gandhi. The introduction of Community Development Program May CGP in 1952 is the outcome of Etava project initiated by Albemarle in the early 1940s. The experiments which will be discussed in this unit are the Sri Niketan project, the Marthandam project, the Sevagram project, the Gurgaon project, the Baroda project, the Nilokheri project and the Etava project. Let us start by briefly analyzing the Sri Niketan project. 2.4 Sri Niketan project. Early effort at rural development was initiated by Sri Rabindranath Tagore in 1908 by establishing youth organization in the Kaligram Progana of his zamindari area. He tried to create a class of functionary workers who could learn to identify themselves with the people. In 1921 he established a Rural Reconstruction Institute at Shantiniketan in West Bengal. A group of 8 villages was the center of the program. Rabindranath Tagore started the Sri Niketan project in 1921 as a protest against the prevailing indifference of the upper class people towards the rural people. This project was closely guided by Mr. Leonard Elmhurst, an Englishman trained in economics from USA. Tagore decided to raise the living standard of rural people through the process of learning. Through this program he organized 40,000 people who belonged to 80 villages over a period of time. This was a very comprehensive program combining culture, health, education and economic aspects of village life together. Concept of village-level workers and regeneration of village organization were put to work. The main activities of the program were 1. Survey of selected villages. 2. Demonstration of improved practices. 3. Arranging campaigns for the eradication of malaria, TB and other infectious diseases. 4. Development of cottage industries. 5. Weavers' cooperatives were organized. 6. Night schools for male and female. 7. Establishment of social welfare center in each village. 8. Establishment of cooperative societies. 9. Establishment of community center. 10. Mobile library for rural people. 11. Scout organization. 12. Management of pure drinking water. 13. Village sanitation works. 2.4.1 Objectives. Tagore's efforts to help the rural masses had the following objectives. Creating an interest in people to participate in their own development. Helping the people to develop their own resources. Developing leaders from the community to guide the people in their development process. To create a real interest in people for rural welfare work. To study rural problems and to translate conclusions into action. To help villagers develop their resources and to improve village sanitation. These objectives were desired to be achieved by creating a spirit of self-help, developing village leadership, organizing village scouts called Brati Balika, establishing training centers for handicrafts and establishing a demonstration center at Shantiniketan. These demonstration centers conducted demonstration or farmers holding for improved practices. Under this program's establishment of dairy to supply pure milk and better animals to the Fanners poultry farm for development of fanners. The students and worker of the institute were provided facilities for training in tanning, pottery, embroidery, tailoring, etc. This institute also had a mobile library and runs night schools, film shows in the rural areas. These objectives were to be achieved through the following strategies. 2.4.2 Program strategies. Tagore based his mission on 4 principles, viz., self-interest, self-respect, self-reliance and joy in work. He carried all the programs through the Institute of Rural Reconstruction which was organized by him. This institute had 4 major departments: agriculture, village welfare, industries and education respectively. The following were the functions of each department. The agricultural department demonstrated improved methods of farming and introduced crops other than rice. 2. The village welfare department worked for the overall development of the villages. I introduced the system of village-level workers. The worker participated fully in the life of the village and identified the problems and areas of concern and reported them to the department. The department in its turn studied, analyzed, experimented and came up with an appropriate solution. As a result of various experiments and studies, the welfare department introduced the following. A medical team to go round and meet the requirement of the village. B. A training team to educate and develop youth leadership for the village. C. A demonstration team to show new methods of farming and handling agricultural equipments and also to guide the farmers in implementing new methods. And D. Scout groups, credit union and cooperatives and paddy stores. 3. The Industries Department established Technical Training Center. It helped the self-employed artisans to meet the local requirements and offered vocational training to the youth. 4. The Education Department introduced open-air education and correlated the learning with the work. It emphasized dignity of labor. This pioneer project was quite active till 1950. But after the initiation of Community Development Program in 1951, Sri Niketan completely lost its identity due to the establishment of a number of government-sponsored institutions. The following conclusions can be drawn from the experiment. 2.4.3 Main lessons. Sri Niketan project brought back the village organization in its completeness in 80 villages. 2. People became aware of their own rich culture and capacities. 3. Since the entire work was extensively promoted in a short one span of time, the people who were accustomed to slow way to life could not digest and imbibe the new system, which was expecting a fast result. 4. Even though the project trained men in new industries with the goal of meeting local needs, it was a failure because the trained men migrated into towns and availed themselves of the new job opportunities. There was lack of government support and research work. Finally, we learned that lack of resources and a systematic trail over a sufficiently long period of time contributed to the failure of this program. 2.5 Marthandam Project. The Young Men's Christian Association, YMCA, started the development experiment in 192 liters at Marthandam, which is located in the district of Kanyakumari under the leadership of Dr. Spencer Hatch, an American agricultural expert. The aim of the project was to bring more abundant life for rural people. It was intended to symbolize the threefold development, not only as spiritual, mental and physical, but later it evolved as fivefold program development of the physic, spirit, mind, economic and social aspects of life. The essential technique of the center was self-help with intimate expert counsel. From the demonstration center at Marthandam, which was in a strategic position to serve the villages, about 100 villages were covered through YMCA centers in villages. The extension secretary was appointed to supervise the activities of the group. The approach of this project was to provide necessary advice and assistance to villagers to enable them to help themselves. This project was started with an idea of establishing a demonstration center in the midst of a rural area from which people of the villages around could learn. 2.5.1 Objectives. The project laid down the following objectives to bringing about rural development. Promoting the rural community on the locally available resources. Eliciting people's participation and enabling them to mark their own decisions and plan of action. Promoting self-help and giving priority to the poorest of the poor. Covering the entire community irrespective of their religion and caste, and developing spiritual basis for rural development. Self-help and cooperation. Helping people to help in their own work. Opening the demonstration centers. Method of work. Before launching the program, surveys are made to know the needs of that area, and on the basis of their needs the programs were introduced. The rural dramas, rural exhibition, inter-rural competition, demonstration were also organized to attract the people. Religious programs were also organized for developing the religious feelings. all-round development of rural life and individuals' progress were the subjects of importance in the program, i.e., farming, rural industry, cooperation and development of panchayat were initiated. For bringing economic development among the rural people, many programs such as soap making and the educational programs etc. were organized. 6 weeks short training courses to villagers and school teachers. It kept prize bulls and goats, model beliefs, demonstration plots for improving grain and vegetable seeds, poultry runs with prize-laying hens, a weaving shed, etc. Inside the center, there was equipment like honey extractors, health charts and the items needed for other cottage vocations. At the center, cottage vocations were taught and agricultural implements tested. The emphasis throughout was on self-help and cooperation. The successful output of this project was the Egg Selling Club in 1939, which became a self-governing body. Another city operative society was Honey Club, where the villagers were taught the use of modern bee hives and extracted honey. Scientifically, the honey was cured and marketed cooperatively. 2.5.2 Program A Strategies. In order to achieve the above objectives, the Marthandam project had the following program strategies. I. Raising funds at the local level / from the community. 2. Demonstrating on the improved system of fanning, animal husbandry, beekeeping, poultry and cattle rearing. 3. Promoting cottage industries in order to generate income. 4. Establishing egg marketing society and beekeepers cooperatives. V. Imparting rural education 11 and health education. And Y. Organizing leadership training courses for the villagers. Thus, this project, starting with a limited objective of improving people in a limited area initially, it developed into a training institute trying to provide ex-pointe advice and trained workers for the vast population of India, Burma, and Ceylon. 2.5.3 Main Lesson. The lessons learned from Marthandam project are as follows. Unlike the Sri Niketan project, the Marthandam project was better organized due to the organizational strength of the YMCA. 2. It concentrated on the income-generating activities to attract poor people. 3. There was an emphasis on marketing so that the product could be sold immediately. 4. The dependence of the village people on the project continued indefinitely, even though it was primarily aimed at promoting self-help. V. Agriculture, which is the mainstay of village community, was not given adequate importance. Y. The stereotype activities such as beekeeping and poultry could provide only marginal gains to some people. 2.6 Sevagram Project. Principles. Self-contained and self-sufficient village life was the dream of Gandhiji. He was aware about the grassroots problems of India, rural setup, and his emphasis was on the use of local people and local resources to address these problems without intervention of any outside agency. Mahatma Gandhi started this program in 1921 at Sevagram. Later it was extended to Vardhai in 1938 after Second Non-Cooperation Movement. The program mainly focuses on prevention of the economic and social suppression of the people and creating feeling of patriotism among them. For fulfilling this objective, Gandhiji made this program, which became famous as Gandhian Constructive Program. This program was totally based on the concept of helping the people to help themselves. The basic principles of this program were 1. Self-help. 2. Dignity of labor, for example Sharamdan, etc. 3. Self-respect. 4. Truth and non-violence. As a political strategist, he was primarily interested in mass awakening and the principle of self-help and independence. It is said that there is no comparison between Gandhi's experiment with other experiments, considering the motivation, objectives, scope and activities. Let us attempt a brief analysis of this program. 2.6.1 Objectives. The Sevagram project was based on the following objectives. To use khadi clothes. To initiate programs on sanitation, women welfare, health, economic help and social harmony in the village. To uplift the backward classes. Primary and adult educational programs. The program of economic help. To improve the conditions of poor people. To popularize the mother tongue and other national dialects. To serve the underprivileged villagers. To make the villagers self-sufficient and self-reliant. To develop the power and courage in rural people. Rebuilding the villages and regenerating the village resources for the villager needs. Promoting village industries. Other objectives are 1. Economic equality. A. Equal distribution of wealth. B. Eliminate middlemen and exploiter. 2. Education, basic education through learning by doing and earning while learning. 3. Social equality. A. Removal of untouchability. B. Equal opportunity for women. C. Community unity. D. Hindu-Muslim equality, service to the less privileged fellow men, developing all aspects of human life. For the purpose of achieving these objectives, Gandhiji adopted the following program strategies. 2.6.2 Program strategies. He considered people's participation and mutual support as a vital requirement for any development program. He advocated a self-sufficient village economy and self-sufficient village community, emphasizing the utilization of local resources for development. He endeavored to set up a society that is self-supportive and self-governing. Thus, in order to realize this scheme, he began to organize volunteers from all over India. 1 worker per village was his goal. 2. The project spelled out every strategy and technique that is to be utilized while implementing the programs. Each strategy was planned in such a way that every villager becomes socially responsible. 3. A village worker from each village was selected, trained and appointed in his respective village. 4. Each worker was trained in spinning, health and sanitation etc. and he had to promote cottage industries, rural education, environment sanitation and health practices, 5. The village workers was also to preach the principle of non-violence and self-reliance. 6. Production of village consumption goods and removal of untouchability was another part of this project, and 7. This project also introduced improved agricultural practices and new varieties of crops. Thus Gandhiji fully believed in the utilization of rural people's talents, skills and participation. Gandhiji blended the sense of people's power with spiritual sanctity through this project, which was the reflection of his own lifestyle. 7.6.1 Main lesson. The lessons derived from this experiment have been listed below. Entirely a new and balanced concept of integrated rural development encompassing economic as well as spiritual aspects was experimented in some of the villages. 2. It gave much importance to the basic principle of self-help instead of depending on the government and others for financial assistance. 3. The inspiring life of Gandhiji was a driving force for all the workers. 4. It was impossible for the project to select and employ lakhs of dedicated village-level workers. The ideals of Gandhiji were too high for the common man to hold on, thus practice became next to impossible, and since Gandhiji was too busy with the national movement for independence, he did not have much time for the project. Check your progress. 1. Note: D. Give your answer in the space given below for each question. 2. Check your answer with the preceding text. A. Who was the driving force behind the Shriketan projects? What were his guiding principles? B. How did the village-level worker function in Shriketan project in solving village problems? C. Marthandam project can be named as people-oriented project. Why? D. Why did the Sevagram project fail? 2.7 Gurgaon project. Gurgaon project was started by E.L. Brain, who was a deputy commissioner of Gurgaon district towards the end of 1920. He was known for his love for the poor and the needy. He also set an example to the people about the dignity of labor, as he himself used to do most of his work with his own hands. After 7 years of study and experiments, Brain evolved a scheme under the IAMA, the Gurgaon scheme. This was the first program started on a mass scale for rural upliftment by state in Gurgaon district. 2.7.1 Objectives. The Gurgaon project has the following objectives: to bring villagers out of old grooves by convincing them that improvement is possible, incorporating the virtues of hard work, self-respect, self-help and mutual support, convincing the villagers that improvement is possible by demonstrating the methods to fight successfully against climatical problems, diseases and pests control through scientific means, showing the way for rural reconstruction, to deal with whole life of the villager. Development work should be taken at campaign level. The focus areas of the project were as follows: agricultural development and increasing food production, health improvement, village sanitation, social improvement, reforms in rural institutions, emphasis on women education, organization of cooperative societies, coordination and publicity, home development works, controlling extra expenditure. 2.7.2 Program strategies. Brain believed that these objectives can be achieved if they are based on 4 fundamental principles, namely, need for villager organization, mass education, setting up of leadership examples by the elite and spirit of service and duty towards fellow men. He framed the following program strategies for this experiment. 1. School of Rural Economy to train village guides. This school emphasized the dignity of labor. The curriculum of studies included scouting, cooperatives, agriculture, first aid, child welfare, public health, domestic and village hygiene, stock breeding and elementary veterinary training. 2. Domestic School of Economy to train women on the subject of women and child welfare. Through this school, the participants were taught elementary education, sewing, knitting, embroidery, hygiene, sanitation, first aid and child welfare. 3. Health Association to run health center. It was established to supervise and guide the health center in the district. The nurses at the center also played the role of health visitors and trained the local women in midwifery. The association organized baby shows, health and sanitation weeks and exhibitions. Through these programs, Brain attempted to convince the people that improvement is possible if the people are given adequate facilities for their sustenance. 2.7.3 Main Lessons. The following are the lessons learnt from this experiment. It created some awareness among the local people that their participation is essential for the betterment of their living conditions. 2. It paved the way for removing some of the cultural factors that hampered the development proofs. For example, Brain managed to get the head imam of Jama Masjid from Delhi to announce that the vaccination for smallpox, cholera and plague was not against religion. 3. It gave a chance to the villagers to know some of the modern technologies in agriculture. 4. One of the limitations of the scheme was that it was confined to a small area. Since there was no coordination among agriculture production-oriented activities and marketing strategies, the market forces continued to exploit the farmers. 2.8 Baroda Project. The origin of this project goes back to late 19th century when Raja Sir T. Madhavarao, a minister in the princely state of Baroda, started some social welfare measures in the state. However, this project gained its momentum when V.T. Krishnamachari was the Diwan of Baroda, started Rural Reconstruction Center, RCC, with the help of Dr. Spencer Hatch of YMCA. The first RCC was established at Koslai in L932 following the model of Marthandam Center. It was one of the biggest experiment of rural development as it covered hundreds of villages. 2.8.1 Objectives. The Baroda project operated mainly with the objectives which are listed below. Changing the outlook of the agriculturists and developing a desire for higher standard of living. Developing village leadership, and imparting adult education. For the achievement of these objectives, the following program strategies were adopted. 2.8.2 Program Strategies. 1. Initially the project covered 10 villages and later on extended to 35 villages. The entire area of this project was divided into A. Intensive zones. B. Areas outside the intensive zones. 2. Economic development programs such as kitchen gardening, weaving, poultry farming and beekeeping and arrangements for marketing the products. 3. Establishment of cooperative society and measures for farm experiments in every village. 4. Providing water supply, improving sanitation, providing anti-malarial measures, and building village roads. 5. Educational and value programs such as Aduvanti education, development of community sense, propaganda against evils such as early marriage, etc. 6. Use of libraries and scout movement. 7. Distribution of improved seeds and training for cottage craft. Thus this project had a variety of program for the development of the rural people. All the measures were welfare-oriented. 2.8.3 Main Lessons. The following are the lessons derived from this experiment. I. Unlike the previous experiments, it, socio-economic program covered almost the entire state. 2. It covered human development and organizational infrastructure. M. This project helped the state to become one of the highly literate states. 4. The farmers gained awareness about the new varieties and practices in agricultural production. V. The success of cooperative societies was not very heartening as 22 societies out of 41 were cancelled in 1942, and Y. The RCC was abruptly closed down in 1946. It is not known whether it achieved its objectives or not. You are listening to this audiobook on Audio Learn Ignou
2.9 Nilokeri Project. This project was also known as the Refugees Rehabilitation Project as it was started to develop a new township to rehabilitate those displaced persons from West Pakistan. This project was started under the leadership of S.K. Dey in 1948. This project was appreciated by our first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru who, after visiting this project, declared that he would like to see thousands of townships in India humming with the music of mussels. In the analysis that follow we will learn about the objectives and programs of this experiment. 2.9.1 Objectives. As it was primarily started for the welfare of the refugees, it has the following objectives. To rehabilitate displaced persons. To attain self-sufficiency by utilizing the labor and talents of the refugees. To meet the basic needs of the population. Self-sufficiency for rural-urban township in all essential requirements of life. Making provision of work and professional training for the people according to their experience. To eliminate middlemen. To make 700 acres of swampy land cultivable. 2.9.2 Program Strategies. As a result of the survey made by Dey, it was found that there were some artisans like weavers, tailors, carpenters, blacksmiths, etc. whose talents and skills could be utilized to produce the materials that were needed for the people. However, the basic philosophy behind this experiment was the restoration of self-confidence which the refugees had lost during the turmoil. This project had the following program strategies. I. Vocational Training CM. Production Center was started to give training and employment opportunities to the refugees. 2. Mazdoor Manzil. A new township was created. Each township had a population of 5,000 and was linked with the surrounding images. 3. The township has facilities like hospitals, schools, vocational and technical institutions for training, veterinary, agricultural extension services and recreational facilities. 4. Each village had a school which functioned as a community center. In this school, agricultural animal husbandry and the local crafts were taught. Cooperatives were established to ensure production, supply and sale. In this experiment we find that they had evolved the program strategies based on the needs of the people and the available resources, thus making it a people-oriented program. 2.9.3 Main Lessons. The lessons learned from this project are many. Let us see the important ones. Based on the success of this experiment, the adoption of agro-industrial economy for the development of the rural areas was visualized. 2. There was decentralization in the administration and thus the program could be run smoothly. 3. It demonstrated that a marshy and jungle land can be improved for the benefit of the poor. 4. There was lack of cooperation in the cooperatives which could not imbibe the spirit of joint family. There was often a clash between the technical and managerial staff. 2.10 Let us sum up. In this unit, efforts have been made to acquaint you with several initiatives to improve socio-economic conditions of rural people. These initiatives, though localized in nature, but its impact was visible after independence in the planning policies and programs related to rural development. Check your progress too. Note: I. Give your answer in the space given below for each question. 2. Check your answer with the preceding text. 1. The 3 main features of the Gurgar project were. 2. What were the main objectives of Nilokeri project? 2.11 Keywords. Spread out effect, result that is caused to cover a larger area and or population. Human resources, resources that are used in the process of production by the human beings, they are, such as, human labor, knowledge and skills etc. Thank you, we will see you in the next video.